Okay, in this video I'm going to really mix it up and try out some Kintsugi. When we moved here we had some things shattered in the move. This cup was one of them. Obviously it belonged to one of my kids, so I'm going to try this out. Now my expectations were pretty low for this $20 kit from, I think it was Chapters or Indigo. You get some powder, you get a little book. The book doesn't really tell you much. Basically it tells you to mix the powder with the glue and then put it on the surface you want to glue together. And for this, it's really just a tube of epoxy. So if you can find an epoxy and some powder, you pretty much have the same thing. Epoxy is about 10 bucks here, so I don't know, maybe it's a good deal. I'm going to use this box to mix things up in. I also grabbed some popsicle sticks. You can see I've got the little bunny rabbit. I'll put that on last. And I went to Home Depot and I got some Gorilla Glue, so I'll use that too to put the bunny on, but that's it. I went and bought some paintbrushes. My big complaint with this is that, first of all, it says there's paintbrushes in the kit and there isn't. And secondly, the epoxy cures incredibly quickly. So I'm just kind of figuring out which piece I'm going to do first. I end up doing the handle first because it's sort of the piece that is the lowest. I think that that's probably key, is to figure out which is on the bottom. You don't want to do something where you have to kind of slot it through something you've already glued. So you can see on the epoxy it cures in 5 minutes. I personally think it cures a little faster than 5 minutes, but whatever. The book tells you to mix these things together. I think I've seen also an option where you can do the glue first and then put the powder on after. But honestly, this epoxy hardens so fast, I don't think that that would be an option with this sort of method. My biggest complaint about this is how fast this epoxy hardens. It's wickedly fast. So take the paintbrush, brush the gold colored epoxy onto the piece that you're gonna, doesn't really matter if you put it on the cup or if you put it on the broken piece. And once you get a sufficient amount on there, you'll know because all the pieces that you're going to glue together are covered. Obviously you don't want to go like too far, just the pieces that are going to connect, and then you just put them together. So not too difficult in concept. So there you go, the first piece is on, and like I said, it's very close to curing already. So this batch that I made, I'm going to have to stop using. The other thing, if you're going to do it this way, I'd make much smaller batches of epoxy at a time, because I end up, wasting half the tube just because it hardens into my tray. The other issue with having the epoxy cure really fast is it just eats through these paintbrushes very quickly. So I use all 3 paintbrushes, and in fact I cut the paintbrushes so that I could use them twice. So technically I used 6 paintbrushes to do this. So you can see I wasted half that batch of epoxy there. But no big deal, it's enough to do this cup. So I'll mix up a smaller batch of epoxy, and that's probably the amount you would want to use if you're doing 5-minute epoxy. If you could find like a 10-minute epoxy, that'd be way better. So just like the first piece, I'll get the epoxy on the broken edge, and then I will put the 2 broken pieces together. Now I think they use something different in ancient Japan. They weren't using a 2-part epoxy. I believe they used some sort of lacquer. Because the issue with this, I don't know that you can sand it, and I don't think you get an option to make it smooth. It's got to be sort of a rough application. I took some of the small pieces and put them together, and then once everything's done, I'm going to go back over it so you don't see the break lines still. So there's quite a bit more epoxying to do here. And really for this one, I only have 2 more pieces. So there's this one large piece, and then there's sort of a small pizza-shaped triangle piece that has to just drop in there. So I will put this in ultra-fast motion and save some of the excitement of watching epoxy get put onto a broken cup. And you can see I'm just using a little nub of a paintbrush there. I think this epoxy thing is fine for something like this, where it's just sort of a novelty cup that you want to retain. If you're going to do something expensive with this, I would definitely not go with 5-minute epoxy. I'm going to probably practice. I got a whole bunch of stuff that got shattered in my move, so I'll see if I could find a better method, sort of with stuff that you can get from Home Depot, Lowe's kind of thing. Or I guess Michael's. Maybe I'll go to a craft store. So once everything has cured, I'm just going back over the lines with the paintbrush and sort of filling it in so you don't see the break line. So there's a picture on the box. You can't make it look like smooth like that. It cures way too fast with this 5-minute epoxy. Here's sort of the example of what it should look like in the book. You can see it's not smooth, it's kind of lumpy or whatever. There's some pictures in the book where it's all nice and smooth. But like I said, there's no way you're going to achieve that with this 5-minute epoxy. And definitely the gold doesn't look quite as brilliant. That's okay. It was a $20 kit. You know, I'm just doing it on a small kid's mug. That's sort of how it came out. I don't think I could sand this epoxy down, but that's fine. You get the idea of it. And I glued that rabbit on. So one other thing I did was come around with an X-Acto knife and sort of clean up some of the lines. I'm going to do that a little bit more and make it a little neater. Anyway, thanks for checking out my video. Don't forget to like and subscribe.